hope everyone is having a wonderful week. We are live here at AST headquarters, which is basically all of our living rooms and kitchens and home offices. And tonight's special guest appearance is Michael making dinner. So there's always that. What are you making again, Michael?
Okay, so tonight it is a tomato basil rigatoni with sun-dried tomatoes and ground beef.
Dang. So I want to go to Michael's house.
I'm jelly.
It's too bad that's a flight.
Well, I am coming out in a couple of weeks, and if I come out,
I know. If you could just wrap some up, throw it in the freezer, it'll be fine.
either that, or hey, you know what? I'm coming in Sunday. I'd be happy. Seriously, I'd be happy to cook for you.
Please cook for all of us.
That's right. That's right.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
That's right. We got Michael. He's gonna cook dinner for us. No, but definitely not the focus of tonight's discussion. We are talking about the lesser known areas of testing this evening. Some of those things that kind of get pushed to the wayside a lot of times, whether it be security or performance. Accessibility would be one of those, and some of the newer kids on the block that are kind of pushing their way into the realm of the QA responsibility area, which is around CI/CD and in a test enablement, right? So whether it be environment orchestration and setup, or data orchestration and setup, and getting, having test data management be part of our practices. This conversation could go anywhere. So I figured I would start it with a few interesting statistics around some of the things around these, and we'll go from there. So one of the big ones that, I continue to see, and I think I've mentioned it on a couple of other live streams recently, is the security paradox, which is, essentially we've got, half of the organizations out there touting their efforts around security, and which is odd that it's only half. But we've got 80% of the companies actually still experiencing these active data breaches, exposure, you name it. The costs associated with data breaches every year continue to go up. And I would imagine that a lot of those numbers are probably understated, because there's a lot of reputational harm, I think, that goes along with this. Those of us who kind of follow the cybersecurity realm know that every time a new report comes out about some big company being breached or losing data, it does, lasting impact.
That's okay. We'll just send all of our users a link to get a gift card for $7 as part of a class action settlement, and
that'll do it.
That'll be
That's what
fine.
it turns out to be, isn't it?
And then you've got accessibility, right? Which is kind of a lesser known. It's kind of in the, it's big right now, obviously, in the mobile space. I almost think that it's better in the mobile space, maybe. I don't know.
well, so one of the interesting things, especially from a accessibility standpoint, I oftentimes tell people that if you are trying to scale your product so that it works in remote as well as tablet, as well as if you do a responsive design project, where so that you've basically done 85% of the work necessary for an accessibility project, because all of that stuff, the agents of the hosts and all that, comes into play with how accessibility handles it. So if you've already done that big responsive design stuff, you have literally already done most of the heavy lifting necessary for accessibility. There are some areas, but
the question is how many are actually doing that, right? And so
not enough. Believe me,
not enough.
So many times I come across a website or someone says, "Hey, let's go to the site," and have it on my phone, and it's the site,
right?
And then I have to pull out to say, "What am I looking at here?" And it's awful.
Yeah. And one of the other, I think you're kind of getting to some of that, Michael, which is, it's not even anymore yes, accessibility is certainly a critical part of it, but one of the stats that stands out to me is that in the mobile world specifically, 95% of users will be lost from an average app after 90 days. So 3 months in, they're done. They never look at it again.
Yeah, that's very common.
And I find that fascinating.
The cost of entry and the cost of exit for the mobile space is very low. And the real challenge that many companies face here is that if somebody has a bad experience with the product, they're not necessarily going to tell you that they're having a bad experience with your product. They just bounce. They're gone.
Right.
There's lots of other options, or they'll try something out, or, as is very often the case, hey, I'm looking for something to handle a particular niche problem that I need for a very short period of time, only to find out that just so I could access that, they secretly ended up putting me into a $40 a month subscription fee.
Right.
Those annoy me to no end. And if I find out that you've done that to me, I don't care how valuable your product is, you're gone.
Right.
I think it's interesting you jumped right to a consumer model in the way that you're talking about that. Because I worked for a lot of my career, things I learned about enterprise SaaS was those people had to use your app.
Yeah.
And then now I work in a B2C context where a mobile app user, we might see them once, we might see them twice. We're not going to see them every day. So it's a very different approach to how to think about our members and how to satisfy them, whether it's accessibility or anything else.
Absolutely. And a lot of it really does come down to, now I'm giving a little bit of this away, but it's probably the one piece that I'm hoping that anybody who attends my workshop or goes to my talk gets to understand here, is that too often we think about accessibility, and if you don't mind me stealing a little thunder here, too many people think of accessibility as something that people with disabilities need to deal with. And my argument to that is everybody gets to be disabled at some point. And I don't necessarily mean that you have to have something me wearing these reading glasses, me taking them off. This screen is not useful to me at all. So this right here, just a simple, basic set of reading glasses, is a disability. But more to the point, so for me, we would call this a primary disability. My vision is impaired. If I don't wear these, I'm going to have a hard time. But there's also what we call secondary or situational disabilities. We get these amazing phones, right? Now, let's just imagine that I am at the front row of, I don't know, I'm picking a band and showing my age. Let's say I go to see Front 242 at the Warfield, right? And somebody calls me.
See you there.
How good is this going to be? How am I going to handle that telephone call? The answer is not, right? But if we want to text, we're fine. So that's an example of how texting is literally an example of an adaptive, accessible feature that you can use in lieu of having a typical telephone call, and everybody knows how that feels. You're in a situation where I literally cannot take a call right now, or if I do, it's going to be silly. So I have to deal with something else. Do I say, oh, sorry, can't do that, or can we just take this to text? Cool, and then you got that, and you can do so. Accessibility goes a little bit farther in realizing that there's more of those opportunities than you might think. There are going to be times where we are going to be mobility challenged. I definitely know this feeling. I went through it 14 years ago when I broke my leg skateboarding. And I discovered what it was like to be racked up in a bed with my foot elevated for 22 out of 24 hours a day for 6 weeks. Not at all fun. But that was my first taste of really getting to experience how it felt to work with systems when your mobility is really severely limited. And also cognitively, you could just get in a situation where you have lots of people throwing things at you and you have to deal with things at the same time, and you just deal with cognitive overload. Every one of us can do that. So the point is, accessibility isn't just for people with specific disabilities. Every one of us can take advantage of accessible design. And the cool thing is that accessible design doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be clunky. It doesn't have to be some framework that messes up your app. It really doesn't. there's a before and after demo that I do. I take a really poor site and a really nicely accessible site, and we jump back and forth between them. And 9 times out of 10, people will go, well, I don't see a difference. And yeah, that's the point. As
Right.
a normative user, you shouldn't. But if you have a need for that feature, it's there, and you're able to take advantage of it.
So is that, I mean, so, you know, a lot ongoing with that. I mean, Michael, I think accessibility testing has definitely matured is probably a solid word for that, but probably evolved a little bit in terms of the approach, in terms of, you know, the strategies around it. And I know, you know, you've got 2 sessions coming up here at CAST. You've got, you know, your session, your track session, and then you actually have a half day session tutorial on really integrating accessibility testing into your core testing plans.
Yes.
So, you know, if you were going to throw out some teasers or spoilers for that, what would that be? What are some of the things that you're really excited to talk about?
Well, okay, if I had to pick any one thing, it's the fact that what I'm hoping to encourage with people, and I'm going to make the emphasis here, what I want to encourage is that we don't necessarily look at accessibility as a set of things that we test. I mean, yes,
Mhm.
the WCAG feature set is massive. Getting into things like ARIA and coding up for accessibility, you could go down a rabbit hole. I could do an entire day's workshop on telling you how to get ARIA to work, which is wild in and of itself, but fairly technical. I could go into all sorts of details as to, well, here's some tools that you can use so that you can do automated testing, but I want to step us away from that a little bit, especially during the workshop, because what I want to encourage is I don't necessarily want to have a bunch of testers walk out saying, I know how to do accessibility testing.
Right.
Oh, that would be great. What I really want is I want to develop a room full of advocates.
There you go.
I get a bunch of people who are now excited about the prospects of accessibility. And more to the point, I'm not looking to make you technical testers with accessibility, though I can help you do that. What I really want to do is I want to make you some firebrand warriors who want to go out there and say, this world sucks for a lot of these people, and we can make it better. And I believe we have a moral obligation to do so.
Yeah. Well, and in many contexts, you know, it is a legal requirement, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
and there are ramifications there. And
Oh, yeah.
granted, that shouldn't be the reason.
But it is. A lot of the time.
But a lot of the times it is a driving force behind some of that.
Most of the, I mention this pretty much every time that I talk about accessibility. There are 2 main things that tend to drive accessibility projects. Every once in a while, you will get an enlightened third, which means somebody feels like it's the right thing to do. And let's just start from that perspective, because oftentimes somebody who's there has a disability, or they're directly connected to somebody with a disability. And it creates that level of empathy, which is definitely a great place to start. But sadly, more times than not, it's driven by you're being sued because your app is not accessible and somebody has complained about it, or you have the chance of making an awful lot of money off of a big contract, but that big contract requires accessibility to be put in place. And
I'd
go ahead.
I'd like to add 1A is because of there's a fairly famous lawsuit in the accessibility space where Domino's Pizza got sued by a rando, and so other companies who have a lot of exposure as consumer as consumer apps or consumer websites also reacted to that and engaged a little more actively with, so what are we actually doing? If somebody did discovery on how we approach accessibility testing, what would the judge think of what they found? Mm-hmm. And I have found a couple times where that has gotten the ball rolling a bit too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So my whole point being, though, is that a lot of the times accessibility is treated as an afterthought. And that's That's the frustrating part. And when accessibility is treated as an afterthought, or it's done at the end of a big project or a big release or after a rollout, it can oftentimes be like pulling teeth, because
Yeah.
you're realizing now that there's a whole lot of stuff you have to do to make a product accessible that wasn't given that previously, right? And so versus coming in from day one, you have a greenfield project, and from day one, you want to make that project accessible to the best of your ability. It's going to be so much easier because you're already starting with that as your goal point.
Right.
And so it's kind of critical that I want to encourage, if you want to be an advocate for accessibility, I want to advocate for you to be early. I want to advocate for you to be kind of forceful and loud. More to the point, I really want to encourage you to always put yourself and help other people get into that mode. That's part of the reason why I like to do some of these exercises. And part of what we will do is I will do some exercises where we get to whip out some duct tape, or we get to put, put somebody with a hat. Ooh, hold on, wait, let me rephrase. This could get dangerous.
I was not expecting that kind of
Real
workshop,
fast.
Michael.
No,
I mean, maybe
no,
I
I'm
should
like,
have.
whoa, what was this?
What I mean is, many of us touch type with our hands, with our 10 fingers, right? Well, let me ask you a question. What if you were limited to that? What if
Right.
you were, effectively speaking, limited to this? How would you interact with your system? Probably a lot less fast, and probably a lot less dexterously overall. So here, and I used to joke about the duct tape, because with the duct tape, it's not easy to take off. Now, there's other things you can use. The University of Cambridge makes this great set that I ultimately want to buy someday. I've resisted it because part of me is like, it's very expensive. There's another part of me that's like, I kind of want to build my own and I want to experience it. They make what's called a mobility limiter, in the sense that it's a glove that you put on, and it has little screw points put on your various knuckles and bends, and on your carpals, etc. And by applying pressure, you make it so that your hand closes slower, or it's really uncomfortable to do.
Yeah,
so.
interesting.
That simulates real world situations like rheumatoid arthritis, or just what happens if you can't get your hand around a mouse? What happens if you can't touch type to do things? Those examples. I encourage everybody, I'll bring a couple of hats in if needs be, but tuck a hat down over your face so you can't see. We have a closet. I'll say, hey, go step away, turn off the lights, and turn off your screen. Now see how well you can. And this is called. Again, I want to give credit where this belongs, and this is something that Albert Gureyev and I got a chance. We first taught this, I want to say, a decade ago at CAST at Grand Rapids, and I've used a lot of this ever since. But there's a mnemonic called HUMBLE, HUMBLE, and that's humanize. Humans say that, unlearn. Figure out things that you do naturally and try to step away from them. Part of the unlearning is where, again, if you have to tie up said hands or fingers, you have to unlearn how you did what you used to do.
Right.
Model, is how you put these things together. How do you model for somebody how to interact if they have a disability? So personas help a lot with this. In fact, there's a great book that was written 10 years ago called A Web for Everyone. And what I love about it is that it's built around about 12 different people, and each person has a unique disability. And so you're not testing to say, I'm going to look at this from the viewpoint of somebody who is vision impaired. No, I am going to look at this from the viewpoint of Gwendolyn. I'm going to look at this from the viewpoint of Carlos. I'm going to look at this from the viewpoint of Kevin, who is vision deficient because of macular degeneration versus somebody else who may be able to see okay, but they need to have 4.0 diopter glasses to be able to do it, which is kind of significant. So, and there's a lot of other examples that play into that. But the idea is you model those behaviors. And then, of course, with that, and B is for behaviors. You learn different behaviors and you practice them, and you use those scenarios to get into the habits. From that, you learn what you need to do to be able to interact with these systems. And then E is enable. And enable, you help other people to do these things now from a different perspective than just I'm trying to fill out the WCAG requirements versus, hey, Gwendolyn's going to have a real hard time using this app. How can we make it better?
Yeah.
And that's a better position to be on. And I feel like I am monopolizing this conversation.
No, I mean, it's great. You are the accessibility SME on this call tonight. So I'm glad that you got to talk a little bit about kind of the setting the stage for the upcoming fun. Who doesn't love a workshop with some duct tape involved? So
that gets quoted.
Right? There we go. That's the quote of the night right there.
So far.
Right, so far.
There's time.
So far.
There's time.
We're setting a bar here. Well, let's move on to some of the other areas. So, we kind of touched on it a little bit. I think one of the things that has been standing out more and more to me, partially because I happen to spend most of my waking hours working with teams that that support an enterprise that has thousands of applications that make it up, right? And so there's a level of complexity that comes along with that. And there's always the challenge of keeping up with the teams, as we've become more agile, as we've become more automated in how we deliver solutions and how we deliver updates to our applications, or even new functionality within our applications. The way that we work in hybrid systems, right, where we're working in the cloud, we're working on-prem, we're working everything in between, virtualized everything, right? There's just everything in terms of complexity has gone up for testers in general, right? And so some of the statistics around this are quite unsettling. And there's part of me that goes, oh, well, at least I don't feel so bad because it's not us that's experiencing some of these challenges, but it is kind of a global thing. So one of the stats that stands out is APM digested a challenges and trends report where they said that 82% of organizations are saying that it takes them over an hour. And that rate is increasing. So it was 74 in 2023. It was 82% in 2024.
So over an hour to do what?
And over an hour to recover their systems.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Scary stuff. Yeah. There are, and what's interesting is that when they did this, so one of the other stats that kind of goes along with that is that there's a very small percentage of teams that are saying that they have been able to reduce their MTTR, right? So, and that number is going down. So in 2023, it was 14%, and now it's 9% in 2024. So these numbers, they're going the wrong ways. And so I think that it's worth taking a look at in terms of, what are the things keeping us from being able to keep these systems resilient? Eric, you have an awesome talk at CAST this year talking about quality and enabling DevOps and how we can play nice, and really this whole concept of the blurred lines between dev and sec and ops and infrastructure and all of this thing coming together in a way that we can create shared success in this and maybe have an impact and maybe be part of the solution instead of always the bottleneck, right? But do it in a safe manner.
Well, I think what I reflected on in hearing you talk just now is how much of how people experience quality these days is as deployed in production. That there's some traditional thinking about quality as a ritual we go through before we ship, as opposed to the real testing happens in production. The real outcomes occur in production. And it's, things are different now with the speed at which we can fail forward and backwards.
Yeah.
But for the talk I'm doing at CAST, I'm kind of focused on an experience report. So that's a format that's kind of precious to our community. I first learned it at a not so many years ago peer workshop where I first met Dawn, actually, where we were talking about performance and robustness testing.
Nice.
And the idea is I want to show up and share an experience that really happened at a place that I worked, talk about the things I did, what we learned, how it went, and then generalizing into your own context. Maybe you can do that. Maybe it will help. I'll share my experience and tell you what I think the important contextual markers are. And then it's for the person who's witnesses this or takes this in to decide, well, that applies to me, that doesn't. I can see how that's relevant to me. I would have done that differently. And that's where the real craftspersonship comes in, I think, is figuring out which of these techniques people are trying to platform and want credit for inventing. Can I actually use profitably where I work to do some good?
Gotcha. What if you were to pose some questions to get people kind of excited about talking about this stuff and talking about your experience with this? What would you share?
I would ask testers if they are looking at production monitoring, or if there are incidents, if they are reviewing those both while they're happening. Maybe they can participate in them, but also the after action, whatever it might be. What are we going to do about this outage? How are we going to address it? And and I don't believe in who screwed up.
Right.
Mean time to blame. MTTB, by the way, mean time to blame.
It's a new metric. It's pretty tight.
If only this one person didn't make the mistake, let's figure out who that was.
Right.
Probably somebody not in this room. Then we would have prevented the incident. I mean, what are the things we actually learned to make a safer, more resilient, anti-fragile system that can live and breathe in production? And so as my career's gone on, I started with performance. I had to learn a lot about how systems work. I had to learn a lot about hardware. But what I've found in a really complex deployed ecosystem, a great deal of the quality surface area isn't just the code that's in front of you and making sure that the next click works. A lot of it is how reliable is this in production? How often are my pods restarting? Can I count on this working? And what kind of feedback am I getting from production?
Right.
How many times did I have to do a rollback in this quarter, for example, because I had a bug? Or what did we learn from the two incidents we had, including the one really bad downtime that somebody important was mad about?
Yeah. It's a fascinating topic, and we could talk for 10 hours just on this topic alone because of all the things happening in it. And I mean, there's so much happening in it. I'm looking at it now going, oh, I wish we had the opportunity to kind of delve more into this. And I'm very, very excited that we have your talk, but it'll be very, very, I'll be interested to kind of have some deeper conversations, side conversations about this and get some of that going because, between the environment orchestration and the building out pipelines and the, getting all of this automation in piece and putting in, static analysis tools and putting in, a lot of the qualitative tools that automate it, right? That allow us to kind of give us some confidence up front that at least the system's not going to keel over, right? Whether it be performance or whether it complies, whether it's going to be safe to put in a production environment without taking half of our systems down, right? or whether we are even being clear. I think, some of the things that strike me, like even being clear around the upstream and the downstream dependencies for the systems that we're putting in place, and specifically the amount of complexity that's been introduced with the microservices architecture, right? And having individual services and APIs functioning in this ecosystem, where now you have to keep track of a bunch of little things and make sure that, there are only so many calls going to one little thing, and how do you manage that, and how do you keep everything up and running, and how you the performance, the strategies around testing that and scaling that. And I think, to get back to your point, Eric, is it really there's a change in how we ensure quality, where it's a lot of that is happening in real time, as opposed to it being a phase of our testing process now before prod, right? Like, everything's happening so fast in these systems that there's not a time for a hardening phase. There's not a time for a performance testing phase like there was 20 years ago. We just don't have time for that, right? So it's becoming more of an operational role, an operational discipline with with the monitoring, the APM, the observability tools that are out there. And I guess my challenge, my question to you all, because I'm sure you all have experienced it even in your teams. How are you keeping up? Like, how's it going out there?
Well,
It sounds like a Don question to me.
She's got all the answers.
Well, I just have my ear to the ground. I'm not doing testing on a day-to-day basis. I do using, and I see, how shall we say, detractors from quality all day long. But with the people that I find in workshops and training classes, they share with me the hits and the misses, and what kind of bubbles up to the management ranks. And as Eric said, this whole blame game thing, which I lived in that space. I remember what that was like. And recognizing immediately it's irrelevant who to blame. It's figure out what your next move is, right? So unfortunately, and Eric, you mentioned this, a lot of organizations only realize that something might be important when you said it was Domino's that took a hit.
Yeah.
It's things like that. So I recommend to people to take advantage of what I affectionately call project pain. Right. So if you got a pain in your project, right, where is it? How can you use it? And
Yes.
I just think that's an opportunity for investigation, awareness, growth. Get on the radar screen of a champion, or maybe even an adversary in the stakeholder team who wants to, squash testing budgets out of existence, and, things like that. They just want to get it out there, and, because we can recover even if we fall on face, even if we have bad press. I get it. But as long as
Well, I think the statistics are showing that we can't. I think that's what we're seeing, right?
But there's perception, right? There's perception that's out there, and you've got management making decisions about what we are capable of doing in the trenches, and we're constrained. So we could have great ideas and not be able to get them incorporated into our processes. Or, for example, how do we get enough time to do all this testing, which I think was your question. But I often guide people to make sure development is doing the testing that they could and should be doing. So when somebody tells me they're testing a button, like, or a checkbox, are you kidding me? That's unit testing, yo. Like, I don't even want to hear somebody, put that on a test plan or think that's in your scope. And I've just been working with a military team whose leadership has shifted from, they function in an IV and V space. So somebody gives them a system, with no requirements, like that's never happened before, and says, you test it and let us know, what's good and what's not good in a complete vacuum, right? Total silence,
Good luck.
because that's a good plan, right? But
they're like, what is it? And who's gonna use
what is it? And this disturbs me no end, right? But what management, upper management, their leadership has come up with is a shift from functional testing to what they define as capabilities. And I think that's an important shift because their division has particularly focused on requirements-based testing, which needs to die its own death in the industry. One feature at a time. Let's write about it. let's write a sentence about it. Let's design it. Let's build it in a vacuum. Let's test it in a vacuum. That didn't get any of us anywhere. So until we can really understand how a system is going to be used in production, which touches on what Michael talked about for accessibility. I used to test products for the blind market. I sat in my office with the lights off. I didn't use duct tape, but I came from tech support. So while we didn't have monitoring and production, us in tech support were those that monitored, in production, and we understood what people were trying to do. And I took those perspectives into testing with me as the only thing I had next to programming experience. And when I started that whole foray, I was lucky that the development teams were wholly responsible for testing the low-level functionality of the product. I was testing configuration, so I was lucky. I was not testing, does this work at all?
Right.
I think that's one way to make room for the other kinds of testing that, a test specialist, or an analyst, a test engineer, a quality engineer, whatever the role or function is that might be adjacent to development or even outside of development, maybe even in an IV&V scenario, is a step away from that core, I built it to do this and I know it does this, before we look to learn more things about what I implemented. So I was lucky, right, that I didn't have to do that sort of requirements-based functional testing as my first foray. And even with that, I stretched the envelope there. Oh, nice. Red card. Yes.
IV&V?
Independent verification and validation.
Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks. So that's an awkward place to be if you've worked with a team before, right? It's hard to imagine that somebody's not just going to throw it over the wall. They're going to throw it into your building, and they've never met you, and you can't talk to them, and it's just such an odd situation. But when I first started in QA, first formal official role, it wasn't that I'd never tested before. I had. It just, I never had the job title before. That was a privilege. So I thought it was important to test positive things, right? Whatever it was, whether it was functionality or just does it work. Negative tests. How does it maybe not work? And then what I called crazy tests. Now, nobody liked my crazy tests, but I've come to characterize them as stress tests, robustness tests, reliability tests. They're in the bucket of edge cases, corner cases, everything that would push the envelope of what could happen in production and what users might do. And they combat these two things, what I call TWINIP and ONT. A user would never do that is ONT. And TWINIP, that will never happen in production. I never want to hear those two things ever from anyone, but certainly not from development, because what do you know about production? You're riding around on a Ferrari, the poor customer is riding around on a big wheel. It's not, come on, you've got, worlds apart, first of all. And then what user have you met? Oh, hush. Just stop. Don't pretend you know who they are and what they do and what they want, unless you are one. And most of the places I've worked, the developers were not indeed users of the type of software they were building. So there's that disconnect. And Michael, you were talking about that. You've got to know what it's like, whether you know it's Gwen or Marco or anybody
humanizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. So robustness testing turned out to be my bag. When I met James Whitaker when I was working at Rational, he came and talked to us before he wrote the book, How to Break Software. And I was like, yeah, that's the stuff. That's what I used to do. And I was so excited. And he was doing a seminar, a little after work thing. All the developers in the company, like 4 different product groups represented, they all looked at each other at the end of his talk and went, yeah, we don't need to do any of that stuff. That's, why would you do that? I was like, oh man, what an opportunity you've lost. So to people trying to figure out how to fit, right, testing into the box that they've got, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's about priorities. I think it's about choices, but I also think it's about looking at your team and realizing that you have an opportunity to divide and conquer. And there's no reason to do, a duplication of effort, right? If developers can test the raw, low-level, isolated functionality that they're building, why do I want to do that same thing? No, I want to step it up. Whether that's end-to-end functionality, put a twist on it. Let's, go for usability. Let's go for accessibility. Me like usability, me like performance, me like robustness, bam, bam. I want to see how those things work. To me, that's all pushing the envelope to potentially higher levels of quality that meet the needs of the organization, meet the needs of users and customers. And to me, that's a more holistic approach to testing. So I say you make time for what's important.
Yeah. Well, and so on that note, right? So making time for what's important, I think part of something that stands out to me is this idea of understanding what quality actually is in whatever environment you're in, right? Like bringing it back to context. And I think we talk about this every time we get on a live stream. Yeah. Like context really is everything when it comes to this stuff. And frankly, understanding your applications at a level where, you're getting the types of insights that allow you to go, we know that this particular area of our system, or whether that system includes one application or 100, right? Like it doesn't matter, that you have the types of data and the feedback loops in place that are telling you, here are the vulnerable areas. Like these are the volatile areas of our system. If we're going to be making changes to these areas, then we need to up our testing, right? Like this part is not non-negotiable.
Right. Or you're accepting a risk, which at the end, at the end of the day, it's the stakeholders team's decision about what direction to go in there. But if we've evaluated nothing, we can't enable a risk-aware decision, which to me is a weakness. A weakness that's too ugly to leave. You want to look under that rock.
And especially because it's something that if we kind of reframe that problem, right? Like us understanding that context and us understanding the risky areas and the volatile areas and getting these feedback loops in place and getting that data for us to look at and then utilizing that information, right? Because it's not just about getting, like, as we all know, there's plenty of data out there, but most of it's not translating into any usable information. So like getting some of that stuff figured out so that you have the right data being fed to people in real time, and ahead of time, like where you need to focus, right? What that most important is, right?
I think that Don was making this point really well, that a responsibility of somebody who's your quality advisor is to be able to explain to you what coverage is and is able to explain to you where the risks are.
Yeah.
And it's not the most fun work, and it's not as much fun as learning how the latest automation framework. But if you want to talk about actual value that drives outcomes and revenue, things like letting somebody make an important call with proper information is way higher leverage than adding another iOS test.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely. And that actually is a good kind of segue into one of the comments that I'm looking at. And actually we could probably answer or kind of add to both of these, but Ben kind of seconded your comment, Dawn, around sharing the pain. I do have a challenge for you guys though in thinking about that. Like, okay, so let's share the pain, right? Everybody feels the pain. Everybody continues to feel the pain because they don't have the process in place. They don't have, they just continue to feel it, and then they become desensitized to it, right? Their tolerance for pain becomes high. What do we see in those situations, right? We see efficiency go down. We see delivery times go down. We see, everything slows down.
How about morale? I can talk about rational software now because, well, technically they don't exist anymore. We kicked them to the curb, but but bless their hearts. They successfully the automated testing business unit that had 3 products that were pretty good in the industry in their day. Very, very competitive. Very difficult to use, and somehow we were proud of that. But for 6 releases in a row, we delivered broken mainline functionality. Simply because we were trying to accelerate the pace of development delivery. We overloaded the development teams. Our upper management's directives were, we want to automate 100% of everything. And we all knew that was nuts, but we just couldn't get them off their, their strategy about doing that. And, beat head here, relentlessly when the people heads down getting completely burned out. And, how good does it feel to be told again, right? Oh, our latest release is on its face, and we're getting bad press, we're getting slammed. We've got customers dropping contracts and things like that. It's devastating to morale, especially if you care. We had a large group of people that actually cared, which is why we allowed ourselves to be abused, right? That way. But it was ugly. And it took a long, long time to self-correct. But by sharing the pain, I don't mean wallow in it. I mean, try to find a constructive way to channel the cause, the root cause of the pain, right? And I dealt with stakeholders head on that wanted to blame QA every single time. I wasn't in QA. Thank goodness. My job title was evangelist. I still don't know what that means, but I was 4th tier tech support. I was the bridge between customers and product management, and I trained internal people, customers, everybody on the product, and I had a bead on what customers really, really wanted. And this management's desire to scapegoat QA, which is a very common thing to do, kind of annoyed me, and I'm feisty. You might be able to tell. What? So I just, I just went, come on, I know you want to blame them and throw them under the bus, but let me break your heart here for a minute. It's actually your fault. But before I give you all the data about why it's your fault, why don't you just let me investigate what is the actual root cause? And then we, as a tiger team, that's what we called ourselves. Anytime there was a problem to solve, we got a tiger team together, a cross-functional team that had the mission of figuring stuff out. Let's go investigate, and we'll bring you back a proposal in 24 hours, in a week, and however many days it was going to take to figure this out. And we learned over and over again, because of their willingness to allow us to investigate, it wasn't misses in QA. It was not. misses in testing. It was not. It was things like we logged the bug, but the team decided not to fix it.
Right.
Or there were no requirements about that thing. It was a missed requirement, et cetera, right? There were things like that. And, it only took 3 years and 6 releases for them to extract head from nether regions and build a new way to define quality and have a different bar for testing than 100% automation. And our exit criteria was we'll ship when there's no more P1 Sev1 bugs in the queue. And oh, by the way, if that rubbed up against our delivery date, the defect fairies came in at night and, demoted all the P1s to P2s and we'd ship the next day. Right? Those are just bad practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I never had the pleasure of working at Irrational Software, but what I have seen is when people talk about sharing the pain, they're talking about, how does change actually happen? And it's a narrative that execs sign on for, that there's a problem and there's a solution and they can get credit for helping fix it. And
Right.
so I think when Ben was talking about sharing the pain, and I think that's kind of what he was talking about, is it's kind of like suppressing an error or suppressing an alarm. If pain as an indicator that something isn't working isn't arriving at the people who can do something about it.
There it is. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was
thinking we'd get to right there.
A lot of the wiring is, who should feel this pain? How do we make it so they feel the pain? Because I need them to make a change, or at least stand out of the way for me to fix the source of the pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what we needed. We needed people to get out of the way. Stop telling us what to do, because those weren't the right things to do. We just needed them to stop. And it was really painful because they were absolutely certain the problem wasn't them.
Yeah. Well, and I think the larger the organization, the more you see this kind of shift of accountability, shift of, well, it can't possibly be us. It's got to be this group. It's not our responsibility. It's got to be that group. It's got to be security. It's got to be infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It's got to be data. What?
Hardware and software teams. Just ask any hardware team what the problem is. They'll say it's software. Ask any software team what the problem is. They'll say it's hardware. I think, radiating it out is important and not sweeping it under the rug or playing the blame game. I think those are really key things to harness. And if you have the ability, y'all out there, be the champion for that. Offer to, lead an investigation and share learnings with the appropriate people. And that's part of it. As Ben and Eric, are pointing out, get the information to the people who can do something about it. That's the key.
Well, and I do think, there are a couple of aspects that come to mind as I think about that, because one, that takes bravery.
It sure does.
Because you're putting your head out.
Or feistiness. Or both.
And both, right? And a lot of times, as many of us who have certainly found ourselves in that position before, know that comes with any number of responses, right? And a lot of times it's not the responses that we really want. And I think the secret, and frankly, I wish I could say that I have mastered this at a level higher than I have. I think I've made some advancement in this area, but I think it's something that I think we all kind of have to continue working on, because just when you think you've figured it out, you end up being presented with someone new with a different personality who it just simply doesn't work with, and you're back to square one. But I think, we always want the truth. We always want the answer. We always want to find the real problem, so that we can fix it. I think that's
we is drawing a very broad circle. We all rationalize some things, and at work, if your success of your key indicators is for there to not be a problem, people find a way for there not to be a problem.
Yep.
Right.
Maybe we as testers have a high value on being able to explain exactly what's happening as a source of
and
truth. But that's not narrative.
I mean, we as testers, we within the quality community, and specifically this quality community, we tend to, get caught up on those things, and we tend to want to get to the answers and tend to want to get to the problem solving. And unfortunately, I think in some of those cases, you can find yourself in a situation where you are breaking down bridges instead of building them, and creating that us versus them mentality. And so it's something you have to learn to navigate. And I think every organization is different depending on the culture there, depending on the support that you have from senior leadership, and the conversations that you're willing to have. And I think there's a whole lot of listening that has to happen. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I have found is probably the best skill that any tester can really take into any situation, is to listen first and, hold off on what you assume. And because we all assume, right? There's all things that are going on. But, upping our curiosity and using those moments to kind of discover together as opposed to coming in with the answers, can sometimes kind of break through and have those build the connections cross-functionally with some of these groups that if you just, if you continue to just go with them and tell them their baby's ugly, oftentimes that does not end well. And I can tell you from personal experience, because I have done it many, many times in my career, that it does not end well. So, one of the questions that came up here is, how would you recommend modeling for a remote team? So kind of taking these aspects, whether it be accessibility testing, any of these really, I mean, it's all around, any of these disciplines, how do you model these behaviors with a remote team? And I think this question kind of came in during the accessibility.
Yeah, that's for Michael.
Yeah, so I can give you a couple of things that I have done when I've worked with people. One of the things that is, first off, one of the things I can definitely recommend, and it's the first tool that I throw people's way, is because it's very visual, especially from an accessibility thing. The quicker that somebody can have a nice visual idea of what's going on, the better you can have a conversation about it. And to that end, the very first tool that I recommend everybody who works on accessibility do is download WebAIM's Wave. And what I love about Wave is that you can pick a page, any page that you're working with, and just launch Wave. And what it's going to do is it's going to put a whole bunch of stuff on your screen. And you're going to see little blocks around your screen where little elements are. And it's going to if it's green, it's going to show you got something good there. If it's blue, it's going to tell you got some ARIA component that's there. If it's red, it's going to show you that that's a violation. And then you can dig in and you can start looking at each one of those. And the reason I like using Wave is that when you show somebody a page and there's a whole lot of red blocks showing up, it gets the point across that there's a lot of things to have discussions about. Now, you may not necessarily have end goal discussions with that. It's entirely possible there might be a whole lot of things that are problems, but, these are decorators. They're not really a big deal. We've got a pretty simple way to deal with that. It's not something that, our system is mostly handled by admin users, and so therefore it's not that critical. And yeah, that is a loophole, by the way.
Sure.
But it's important to know about that and be able to communicate that. And what it starts to do is you start to have the conversation. You start to look at, oh, wow, we've got all this red on the page. What is the red? Yeah. You get into the habit of looking to see where the red is. And then you start to think, how can I solve that? How can I fix that? What needs to go in place for this? And if it's something simple, hey, just make a work order and say, you know what? We got a whole bunch of decorator images here. Can we just put in alt equals null for that? That's a simple trick. By the way, if you got a whole lot of little graphic elements that hold your page together structurally, you don't care about any of that, and your user doesn't care about any of that. So they don't need to be drawn attention to it. But if it's not there, then every little one of those things is going to show up as an element when you tab. And that's annoying. So
yeah, it is.
It doesn't matter to them. Take it out of the equation, and there are simple ways to do that. Or if there's something you want to make sure that is referenced there, go ahead and do that. You'll see that. And the idea is each time you come in, you get in the habit of hitting that little button. And maybe if you have a stand-up meeting, for example, with your team, it's like, hey, everybody, do me a favor. Go hit wave. Tell me what you see. And then you have a quick conversation about what you see. And in this case, nice. Okay, let's go talk about this. Or, hey, let's have a little chat about ARIA controls and what should be in them. And the whole idea behind ARIA is just basically saying, we're going to call out this code that under this circumstance, we're going to tell a user X, or under another circumstance, we're going to tell a user Y, but they need to be actionable. So, okay, how can we make it more actionable? Do you like what you are hearing, for example? Fire up VoiceOver on a Mac, or fire up NVDA, or if you're rolling the money, go upload your version of JAWS that you have. Point being, you don't have to necessarily have those tools. It's built in already when it comes to a Mac OS system. VoiceOver is built in. If you want to download NVDA to run on Linux or to run on Windows systems, you can for free. And then you can start getting that experience and you can start playing with it. And I will oftentimes encourage, hey, today, who wants to do a run with the voice recognition software? Who wants to do Dragon? And yeah, I tell you, if you're doing vocal dictation for commands, you've got to be patient. It's enough to make you want to throw your computer across the room. So that is something that I would recommend you model and you show people how to do, train them up on it, and tell them you're going to get frustrated. And it's okay. But don't let the frustration consume you. And so sometimes it might help for them to see you kind of lose your cool once or twice. So, hey, look, yeah, this is something that even seasoned users get annoyed with. But, if they see that, then it's like, oh, I don't have to feel like, oh, I don't understand this, or I don't know how this works, or I'm not in a position to really do this. They see, oh, okay, even the seasoned users get a little frustrated. That's heartening.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you kind of approach it much like you would do with someone in the room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a whole lot different. Yes, there are limitations, but I mean, in many ways, when you're kind of demonstrating the behaviors, it's hey, get your hands in, get your hands dirty with
Absolutely. Get your hands in, play around with it. For my purposes, I will be as patient as I can possibly be, but I am immensely more patient when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I've been working with X and I've tried this and this and this and this, and I'm kind of stuck here. I think I understand what we're supposed to be doing, but I'm not 100% sure. Well, one, I already know that they've tried. I know that they've gotten some things in and they're able to at least address the vernacular for it. So I don't have to start from square zero. And I know what they're working on. So I can go, oh, cool. I get what you're looking at. Here, let's go this way. And, also something that I would suggest doing, and it can be time consuming, but it can have a big effect. And this goes back to, how do you model for a team? If you have opportunities where you're doing one-on-ones with people, get their consent and say, hey, what would you think about us making this into a webinar session, or a session where we'll walk through the problem, we'll experiment with it, we'll try a few things out. And then when we're done, I have a recording of that entire conversation, and we can go in and we can cut out the stops, the stalls, the embarrassing dead ends, or unless a dead end is actually really useful, then we'll keep that because, hey, we found this through this testing approach. We found this on accident, but this is a real issue. Hey, let's call this up. But you save those and you put them in a library someplace for the next person that comes down the road to say, hey, I'm curious, would I handle X? Is happy to talk with you, but could you go here first? Check out this 10-minute video that we did that kind of walks through this. Once you've done that, play with it yourself to see if you understand it. And if you do, great, we can take on something else. Or how have I explained that in a way that doesn't work for you? And if it doesn't work for you, would you be willing to come to me and we can do this again and show me how we can do this better? In other words, one of the things you want to model for your team is that you're not going to be the source of all answers. You're not necessarily going to get it right the first time. You might fumble around together, and each time that you do it, you have a better chance of finding something new, because we all look at things a little bit differently. And over time, you could build a nice little library of, hey, here's a scenario with this person, here's a scenario with this person, here's a scenario with this person. Now you put them together, now you've got a good comprehensive look at this particular problem, and now you can ace it.
Yeah. Wise words. Wise words.
I try.
Well, thank you. and again, we're only going to scratch the surface on a lot of these conversations tonight. I mean, we're wrapping up here, coming to the end of the hour. Well, we're a little past now. But I think, it's these are conversations that are just going to continue at CAST coming up. So I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I am very, very excited to see all of your sessions in one form or another, even if I can't make all of them in person. I plan on seeing all of them at some point.
You haven't cloned yourself yet?
No, haven't quite mastered that yet. But also, I do want to, throw out there for the people who are watching this evening, there is a CAST 2025 discount QR code out there. Exactly. That's going to look different depending on where you are on the screen. Get out there, register for CAST. It's coming up. It's, a couple weeks out. So, but it's going to be amazing. If you are, I'll tell you the insider secret. If you do become a member of AST, you have the opportunity to join CAST virtually. So for those of you who are not able to make the trip to Salt Lake City, we are offering a virtual option for our members. But we want to get you into our community to take advantage of that offer, because, we want to get you part of our community. We want more voices, and we want more perspectives to be out there to support one another. So thank you all. Look forward to seeing you in Salt Lake City, August 25th through the 27th. And until next week, we will wrap it up tonight. And Michael, enjoy your dinner. And the rest back to your evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Have a great rest of your